Excuse me, sorry.
Okay, everybody, this is our last synchronous session for the semester, and I just wanted to give people a couple of reminders of things. So, everything that you turned in last weekend was good, and I know some people are turning in songs late and stuff. That's fine. Just keep uploading and the material or turning in your material. Noah was having problems with uploading songs directly to Canvas, and that is because Canvas doesn't like us to upload material directly to it. So if you save your songs in SoundCloud or YouTube or Vimeo or something else, and then send us a link to your songs when you upload the question and answer stuff, that will make things easier for everybody else. The other thing is that you have peer covers next week, and not everybody is uploading chords and lyrics. So, just to help other people who might be covering your song, you should make sure that at least the lyrics are there. If you don't know what chords are, that's fine, but maybe not having everybody guess what all of your lyrics are would be helpful. And then one last thing, I did uh, recently run into Esme Patterson this weekend, and some of you know her because she came to class last semester if you were at Dime. But I don't usually repeat artists in a semester. But she's been teaching. Everybody's trying to make it during this kind of COVID time, and she's been doing private, like one-on-one lessons, just in songwriting and developing songwriting, and she prefers to work with people one-on-one. Because this is going to be posted on YouTube in a few hours, I'm not going to broadcast Esme Patterson's email address right here. But if you are interested in maybe like meeting up with Esme, and she says she's doing a kind of sliding scale for people who want to work with her. And she has openings for students, so she's had students, but she still has openings. So if you're interested in that, or just chatting with Esme about, I mean, she's making it as a songwriter and like making it kind of barely because of COVID right now, but hit me up with an email after the session, and I can give you Esme's contact information. Any burning questions before we get going with Tom today? Okay.
And I'm sorry, I can't get my camera to work for some reason.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything I can do from here. Let me
No, I
my
don't know what's
yeah.
going on with it on this end.
Um, that's okay. So Tom is like one of, I think, the most unique guests that we've had in class for the semester, because not only is he a musician in his own right, um, uh, I think that Tom probably knows more about not only Denver music but just underground music. Period. He writes as a critic. He performs. He's like the person at the show when no one else is at the show. All of the time, he's documented it with his camera. He's taught pop culture classes, and he's written for a variety of sources. And he knows a lot. I think, I don't know, Tom, if you've finished it, but you were writing a book, I think, on the history of the Denver music scene. Is that right?
That's a long-term project.
Yeah.
Once you get a little bit into it, you find out there's a lot to know.
Yeah.
And with anything like that, you can only write so much, so you have to figure out what do you put. So that's on the back burner. But I'm
Okay.
working on a memoir of my time in DIY music, like a photographic memoir right
Oh,
now.
excellent. Yeah. Yeah, and definitely like not just the big clubs. So like Tom knows the DIY scene, and in that sense, there might be even more connection to some of you who are out in Detroit,
Oh
as
yeah.
because a big portion of there's actually 23 students in the class right now, and a good portion of them are out in Detroit.
Oh great.
Um, so maybe, I mean, that was a bit of an introduction, but maybe you could talk a little bit about yourself, Tom, and what you're up to right now?
Oh my God, I don't know. I don't like to talk about myself that much. Where should we start with this, do you think? That might be useful for your students.
Well, I shared with them the Queen City blog and
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
But maybe you could talk about some of your musical projects first, and then we can talk about writing and promoting and scenes and things like that.
Okay, sure. I grew up playing music. I started playing, I wanted to play French horn, oddly enough, but they didn't have one in the 70s when I was in elementary school, so I settled for trumpet. Played that for years, learned theory and all that kind of thing, and then promptly forgot it after high school. But in the late 90s, I was listening to the Joy Division every day, which is probably not healthy, but I was doing that. And so I taught myself every Joy Division bass line on bass because I didn't really, I knew what instruments were, but I was like, whatever sound that guy is making in the song, I want to play that. And it was the bass guitar, and it was Peter Hook, of course, who I've interviewed a couple of times for Westward from Joy Division and New Order, in case people don't know who that is, because he's not that famous, right? Not anymore. Um, yeah. And then I got into Riot Girl music by reading some quotes from like Carrie Brownstein from Slater-Kinney and Kathleen Hanna from a band called Bikini Kill. And I thought, well, they're speaking my language in terms of culture and like politics and whatever, but talking about bands too. So I got way into Bikini Kill and Slater-Kinney. Slater-Kinney has no bass player, but Bikini Kill, I taught myself all their bass lines as well.
Hmm.
And I wanted to start a band, and I wanted to start like a punk band for some reason, like everybody does in your late 20s right now, in their teens probably. But that wasn't me. So what was punk turned into really post-punk, because that's where my heart was, and into like alternative rock stuff like shoegaze and slowcore, kind of, all about slowcore, Roger.
Yeah, I know about
Yeah. You're in one of the more important bands, in my opinion, of that movement. Uh, Not that it was just that, right? The ours weren't just a slowcore band. Um, and then I never really played out. I had a band, and none of us really. We practiced in my garage of all places. I was 29 in a garage, and they had different names. They were all horrible names that I would never use now. Ill-advised, horrible names because I was trying to offend. But as you get older, you realize just offending isn't enough. It's not really effective most of the time. It's funny, but. But the first real band I had that played out was a band called Ghostlight. And it was kind of like an amalgamation of my post-punk background. Our drummer, she learned to play drums just to be in the band. She was my coworker at a call center.
Great.
And Maya Fortis, who you may know in some other capacity.
No, I actually don't know her. Yeah.
Oh, no, she was in a Toi et Moi. Anyway, she was in the Bedraggled for a while. I don't know if you remember them or not. Like Reverend Deadeye used to be the lead singer for the
Okay.
Bedraggled.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were like a Nick Cave-esque kind of band. Um, anyway, so her and her boyfriend at the time and I were in a band together, and it was like he was way into like South California, like experimental music, like I don't know, like 3 Mile Pilot and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so it was this weird band. And then I remember our big shining moment. We played 3 shows. One of them was at Monkey Mania. One of them was in a backyard on like the 4th of July. Like the backyard, what are we doing? And the final show we played was at the Climax Lounge, opening for Space Team Electra and Bright Channel. And
Oh,
we did a
yeah.
we did a cover of the Twice Wilted song called Brighter, which you may know.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was a big deal then. But then that band was broke up because that couple kind of had some problems, and it was kind of over. So that was, I don't know if I'd consider that. I don't know if I'd consider anything I've done that serious. But after that, I did like a post-punk shoegaze band that became known as 900 Ancestors, and then that was breaking up, and I had a solo project that became an ambient band now called Pythian Whispers,
Hmm.
which has had a bunch of people in it. One of them was a internationally known photographer named Charles DeGraff. He was in it for a long time. And another photographer, I mean, everybody in the band is a photographer, which is really bizarre to me, but that's how it worked out. Like David Britton, he's like a graphic designer. He's still in the band and a photographer. And Joel Dallenbach, I don't know if you know him or not. He was I'm trying to think what band he was in. Not Francis Theory. He was in some late '80s kind of punk band from Denver. But he's been like a pretty hardcore like photographer of not just music but of all kinds of things. And he got like a he asked us to play a show where he was getting his photography on display at DU at their like some kind of art center there, and he asked us to play the show, the opening of that. So it's a weird band, kind of like not that active right now. Like a lot of people aren't active right now, of course.
Right.
And I don't know, I felt pretty burned out on music, but I'm getting back into it. I got a couple of new toys that a lot of times that will inspire you to do something that you haven't done before. Like I don't really know how to use stuff, but you figure out your own way to do it. I know you know all about that because I've seen your pedal board for one of your solo projects. I don't know if it had 40 or 50. I'm kidding, but like a lot of pedals, right?
That's
But
a
the way
lot.
things go, was that the project?
Oh yeah, the way things go. Wow, I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Oh yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, yeah, that was great. Like, yeah, that was an ambient band that I had with this guy named Tyler Potts
Oh, okay.
and Angel. Yeah, who don't they don't live here anymore. They've gone off and done other things. But Tyler Potts is a amazing artist. Especially he's I think he's kept up doing it.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
he did a
That's
52 songs project one time where he wrote a song a week for a year, and yeah,
pretty heavy duty. But like I don't know, like you and I play. You know how to play guitar for real, or I assume you do. You have chops, Roger, whereas I do not. But you know as well as I do that's just a tool. But the real work is like being able to imagine stuff that's different and putting your creativity into that. And that's the only thing I have going for me is like, oh, I can listen with other people and do something together with them and take weird sounds and like use effects in unconventional ways and like volume swelling and all that kind of thing where you can do all kinds of creative stuff and with sounds and you don't have to like play a guitar like a guitar.
yeah,
Like my guitar is almost like a synthesizer. Like when we play, like people can't tell who's doing what, and
yeah,
I'm definitely playing guitar. So anyway,
yeah.
that's the music part
Yeah,
in terms
and
of playing.
definitely attention to textures because the people are kind
Right.
of at the point in the class. People are we've been writing all semester, and now they're kind of
Mm,
putting together what would be kind of EPs or like at least demo things because not everybody's releasing like EPs. So sometimes people are releasing one song at a time now, and
mm, mm.
so people are just sort of putting, I guess, maybe like a portfolio or a collection of songs together and thinking about what to do with them um,
Yeah.
in the next few weeks, and that's kind of what the class is about. Is like here's a collection of your stuff. Now, what are you gonna do with it? A couple more people are joining, and so I think that especially when I was thinking about having you come in, like you've played in bands and stuff, but you decided very much, I think, a long time ago to commit yourself to the community and to the scene and to like aesthetics like you like Pythian Whispers is very much an ambient and noisy type of project, but
Right.
you don't only write about like music that you love
No.
or music that sounds like the music that you do. Um,
Right. Like that would be really boring to me. It'd be
yeah,
very limiting. Like being a specialist like that has its uses, but I haven't found that to be particularly interesting. Like I didn't grow up listening to ambient music. Like when I was a kid, I heard like Vangelis, but I didn't think of that as ambient music, right? It was in movie soundtracks or like Tangerine Dream, right? I didn't think of that as a krautrock band, right?
yeah,
It was just they made this cool music for a movie or whatever, like Chariots of Fire or whatever. Um, I'm trying to think of that Tom Cruise movie where
the Big
I don't know
Chill.
how to,
What is it?
what's that?
The Big Chill? Is he in the Big Chill? No.
No, no, he wasn't in that. He was
Uh,
way too
uh,
young to be in that. He was in like The Outsiders and this movie, the Rebecca De Mornay, that I'm completely blanking on.
what is it?
Risky Business.
Risk. Yes, thank you. I don't know why.
And
Big
oh
Chill.
yeah, yeah, same here. I was like, I grew up watching this movie when I shouldn't have been watching a movie like that. At 12 or 13, a rated R movie. Oh my gosh. Um, so like you're exposed to all kinds of music unless you live in a really rarefied atmosphere culturally, and most people I don't think are. Like even if people are way into punk and that's their identity, they listen to more than that if they're honest with themselves, in my opinion. And I think being able to appreciate more than, and you definitely appreciate more than like whatever. Like I grew up hating country music because it was shoved down my throat
Mhm.
until the 2000s when a friend of mine said, "Oh, this band." Well, okay, I didn't hate like Patsy Cline because if you hate Patsy Cline, you're like I don't know what you are. You're evil and weird in a bad way. Or like if you hate Johnny Cash, I just don't. I can't relate to you, you know. But like everything else, I had to hate until like, and I saw 16 Horsepower like in 1994 and had to hate it because it was too much like go roping country music to me. I was wrong, but it took later on a friend of mine saying like this album called The Secret South is really good, and his taste in music was so good. I couldn't deny that, and I listened to it and went, you know, this is really good. And I've had the wrong view of country music, and like now I appreciate the storytelling and some of the musicianship, even if it's not like what I would normally listen
Oh,
to, is pretty good.
Mhm.
So yeah, like anyway, and learning to write about that stuff and relate to it on a human level rather than like, well, these are the genres I like the most. I find that more satisfying than like being too much of a specialist. Because what you learn about one, you can use to interpret other things too. So it broadens your way of even talking about the stuff you do like, I think.
Yeah, have you felt like taking on the role of a critic has informed your artistic work then? Or in what ways might they?
Yeah, like, I mean, I've played on
why?
other people's albums too. Like, I've played on a few hip hop albums even, you know.
Mhm.
But like hip hop, some of that stuff is part of my own musical identity because some of those artists in the 90s and early 2000s are super weird too. And modern, like underground hip hop, has totally embraced noise and industrial and ambient music as part of their beat making. Um, so, like, I would say that role as critic and realizing that level of it and reintroducing that into the music itself has helped enrich that as well, I would say, overall. So I think that's an interesting question you ask, and I think, yeah, absolutely, it informs it because of that.
John, I noticed that your mic is on. Were you wanting to ask a question?
No, sorry about that.
That's okay. Anybody can ask a question if like at
Oh
any
yeah,
time too.
Sorry if my phone is. I'm trying to get this camera thing to work, and it's not working for me.
same here.
Yes, I think that's a common
If
problem.
if you if you heard me yell at my phone, I sincerely apologize.
Oh no, you're good.
So you've mentioned a number of bands that I know because I remember
Oh yeah, yeah.
like so 16 Horsepower, which was a really important band in
Oh, absolutely.
I mean still is, but especially in the 1990s. Space Team Electra, you mentioned Bright Channel, you mentioned, and sometimes I have folks from the scene come in, but I've never had any folks from those particular groups. And even though David is still around, and I occasionally talk to Michelle Prashad, and
Oh yeah,
um,
same here.
but maybe I wonder if you could talk about developments that you've seen in Denver music since that 1994 encounter with 16 Horsepower. And just for people who've never heard 16 Horsepower before, what was important to me about them in the early 1990s was they were a Denver band that got onto a major label. And there were
Right.
only like a couple bands. There was a band called Spell that did, and then I think they imploded. I don't think much happened after that.
No.
But 16 Horsepower had a long run, and now Woven Hand continues. But that's why they were an important early band in lifting up the scene. But I
Right.
wonder.
Like them and like I'm trying to think of that band, Big Head Todd and the Monsters got
Oh
on a
right,
major
yeah.
label. Like not that I'm a fan of theirs, but their first record, Midnight Radio, great record.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think the Fluid got on a major label before they imploded around the same time Spell did, and it was all part of that like mid '90s alternative rock implosion, I would call it, like a backlash against anything innovative. I'm kidding. No, I'm being a hater, Roger. I'm sorry. But like the mid 90s were kind of like, in America, were kind of the dark ages for like innovative music, in my opinion, other than like electronic stuff. But for me, 16 horsepower, I never took any local bands seriously, or the ones I took seriously were broken up by the time I could go and see them. Like the Warlock Pinchers were a big deal, and they were on a label, not a major label, but notorious and like legendary, like sort of punk, sort of hip hop, sort of electronic band. Super weird, like stage performances, like a meat cannon they would fire off at the Gothic Theater, like with meat launched in the audience. I mean, who does that? I don't know. They did. Um, they had famous entanglements fighting the Nazi skinheads to maybe not duking it out, but like, having fun at their expense. But so these were like bands I'd heard of, or like Tommy Bolin was like famous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's not as well known now, but he was in like Deep Purple. He played with Billy Cobham, the big jazz guy who played, I think, with Miles Davis, maybe, and Billy Cobham. But anyway, he was dead. The Fluid I'd heard of, they were gone. And the Warlock Pinchers were broken up by the time I got out of college in 1992, etc. So I didn't think local bands, I'd be like, oh, a local band? Like a lot of people in the scene think like somebody like, well, Nathaniel Rateliff is famous, so that's a bad example. We'll say Dressy Bessie, that they're like super famous, and they are in their way, but they're not like a household name, right? They're not like Nathaniel Rateliff, who's basically a household name at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I could name that to a lot of people, and they'd be like, I don't know who you're talking about. And so, like, that was where my head was at too. Like, Monkey Siren is a band that was well known in the scene in the mid '90s. I didn't know who the hell they were. like I'd heard of them. I saw where Sympathy F was a big band too,
Mm-hmm.
in the local scene, right? And like Twice Wilted were like legends in the local scene, but outside of Denver, pretty much nobody heard of these people. And so like I think like a lot of people, I didn't know there was anything that was worthwhile. I knew about underground bands from other places. I lived in Illinois for a while for college. I heard about bands from there, but Denver I didn't take seriously. And then 16 horsepower was like, well, there's a fine example of why I shouldn't take the local scene seriously, which was ridiculous. That was my own ignorance masking their genius to me, right? It just sounds super melodramatic, and I apologize, but that's who I am. Anyway, a couple of bands broke this down for me, like shattered the image of local music, not be, like, but I still thought of the first few as being like an anomaly. Like, oh, here's the one good band from Denver, Sarah from Shock, which but a lot of people, if they saw it, they'd be like, you, Mr. Warship Joy Division and My Bloody Valentine, like Sarah from Shock? I'm like, yeah, I did. They were very theatrical. They were almost scary. It was kind of cheesy, like mixing like bad, like glam metal with gothic rock and industrial music. But they really went for it with the costumes and the like Victorian vampire look. You probably remember them from back then,
Yeah.
the 90s. And I thought it was just impressive. Like the stage show was like top notch. Like I hadn't seen too many even bands not from here that were that good. And I went, okay, they're an anomaly. Then I saw the Down and Outs, who you may remember as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blown away by them, but especially their drummer, Jim Chandler, who went on to join his favorite band of all time, The Cramps, right? He was in that band for a while. But I never saw a drummer be like, play with that kind of charisma, which is not something usual. Drummers usually, they're like, doing whatever. But he had a lot of presence, and the band was so good, but I thought, oh, they're an anomaly too, right? But the band that made me go, this is not an anomaly, was Rainbow Sugar. I saw them open for Slater Kinney in 1998 at the Fox Theater.
Mm-hmm.
And a band called the Pauline Heresy, who I know at least one person in that band very well. But you remember them probably.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they were good, but Rainbow Sugar, I saw them get on stage, and I've told the story a million times. I'm sorry if people are hearing this again. But their singer had baby chick, bright yellow hair, big hip hop pants, and their bass player had bright pink hair. The other two women in the band looked like women that would be in a band at that time. Like people forget maybe that like people thought it was weird for women to be in bands. I never thought that, but that was a thing that people went through even now, which I find puzzling. Like, get over that, people. It's a thing. So they just looked like a women band, and I was like, but the other two people, I was like, oh, this is gonna suck. Like, look at these people. They look like a caricature of a band. Then they played, and they became my favorite band at the time from that show. pretty much. And I went to try and see them as much as possible. Then, like within 6 months, I saw like a Orbit Service, which is a psychedelic ambient band from here. They were a psychedelic rock band at the time, more an ambient band now. Thought they were pretty impressive. And then I saw the other band that like changed my world. I saw this video on MTV. Huh. I'm gonna bite my tongue and cut it off, Roger. On Teletoons. Okay.
Teletoons, yeah.
Yeah. Teletoons was a video program for people that don't know what it is that ran from like 1981. Well, it had a different name initially. It was called FMTV. And it became Teletoons, and it ran from 1981 until about 2002 or 3, something like that, maybe 2001, I think. I don't know if I have that correct. I could ask Heather Dalton if she would know. She was one of the hosts. But she, anyway, there was a black and white video for this weird band with a name, Space Team Electra, and they were doing a cover of Painted Black. And I didn't really like it because the audio wasn't very good. Now I'm more savvy about how audio doesn't necessarily mean the band is bad or whatever. But there was something about them. And then I forgot. And then I went to go see Man or Astroman at the Bluebird in April 1999. And they opened, and Zen Gorilla played too. But after they played, I didn't want to stick around for the other bands because I was like, there's no way anybody could be this good after this. Like, Man or Astroman shouldn't play, and they were the headliners. And I did stay for them, and they were good, but Space Team Electra was like so mind-blowing. It was exactly the music I wanted to see at that time. Kind of like this shoegaze band, but not trapped in old shoegaze tropes. If I can call it that at that point, like shoegaze was like a big deal or anything. It wasn't that big of a deal. Like Nirvana eclipsed all of that. You know, grunge eclipsed all the really cool, in my opinion, alternative music to some extent. Anyway, blah, blah, I'm going off on all these tangents because I know too much about that history. But, and there was like a lot of poetry, and there was like a weird spiritual component to the music, I felt. And as an atheist, that seemed weird that would appeal to me in some way, but it did. And then I saw, I'm going to see this band as often as I can. I went, the second time I saw them was like a week later during a blizzard, driving to Boulder to the Boulder Theater. And opening that was a guy called Munley.
Oh, yeah.
And he was doing his like sort of folk, sort of dark, I don't know what to call it, Americana, post-punk. It was great. It was really like haunting, you know. And of course, he was in 16, not 16 hours. I'd say the Denver Gentleman. He was not in that either.
Slims.
Slim Cessna's Auto Club, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway, he was good, but Space Team Electra was somehow better even than the first time I saw them. And I was like, I can't believe this band is better this time. And so like, and that made me realize, and then I started going to 15th Street Tavern, going to see Rainbow Sugar the first time. I never went to a bar to see a show. I don't drink. I'm allergic to a lot of that stuff, and I'm half Asian, so that alcohol doesn't really cooperate with my biology very well. So I just don't do it. And so I didn't go to bars for anything. I'm like, I'm not going to go to a bar for a show. But then I started going because of some of these bands, because that's where they played. And in the middle of all that, I read an article about a band called Saint Andre, who you may remember as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably played shows with them, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, what was your band like in the mid 90s? It was Something Mind. Idle Mind? Was that it?
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know why I'm putting it together, because I think St. Andre and Idle Mind may have had a song on a compilation together.
There was a Schmo Balls thing.
Right, exactly, Schmo Balls.
Older record company, yeah.
Yeah, that came out like 95. Anyway, I read this article about St. Andre and Westward, and I'd gotten fired from my call center job, which I highly recommend everyone. Try and get fired from your call center job if you have one. They're evil institutions, and they should be abolished, with some exceptions. But anyway, terrible job, and I thought, I'm bummed I got fired, but I saved up enough money working 64-hour weeks for like a year or two. I don't really care. I can get another job. And then I got tickets in the mail to see Rainbow Sugar, and I thought, I can't go see them after work that night. And then I got fired and went to see them. And then I read an article about St. Andre and saw them 2 days later. And opening that show was a band called Dressy Bessie, who at that time were still pretty punk, very fuzzy, like the Velvet Underground or something, but like a pop band. And I was blown away by them too. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I went to go see them a lot. So like, I was on track. I was getting my poli-sci and history degree back then. So I was on track to go work for the State Department or some soulless crap like that. Not that I'm Not that I wouldn't take that kind of job now that 45 is out of office coming up. But you understand, like after seeing that, I kind of wanted to be more part of that. I don't know how you make a living doing that. And now I have a better idea, but not that I do. But that seemed way more important than some dumb job that I was doing at like some call center job. And you can go and meet these people. It's not like they're like, there's someone like, even like other bands too, don't necessarily have somebody who's like their guard, you know. Can you imagine like, just now, Tana Elam, her bodyguard says she has these demands before you meet her. You don't have to do that. They're sitting at the bar. If you wanted to talk to them and you're not a total wacko, they'll probably talk to you, right? I mean, I don't know. If you have, you've toured outside the United States, so I don't know, like you've had that experience. People just come up and talk to you and expressing their appreciation for what you do.
Yeah, and sometimes what they didn't appreciate.
Right, exactly. They're like, what are you doing up there with all them pedals, Roger? Well, not even Roger. They probably thought you're the guy in that band.
Yes, I do recall an Englishman in Budapest who came up to me one time and said he asked for his money back because it was the worst shite he'd ever heard.
Ever heard?
Lifting night.
What? I mean, like, okay, I want to be totally real for a minute. There were some times when I saw the Czars where I'm like, this is pretty boring. The music was not boring, right? Like the songwriting was not boring. Sometimes the show is a little too tranquil for me. Now I love it, right? But at the time, you know, whatever. But it wasn't all the time, and the music did not suffer for it. So, like the guy saying it's the worst shite he ever heard. I mean, like, what is he into? Like, I mean, I don't know. Anyway,
he was into getting in a fight, which was what he was.
Oh, right. That was his goal. He didn't care about the music.
That is what he wanted to do.
Right. And he came up to you. I'm gonna fight that guy. Yeah. Like anyway, like you're like one of those genteel people, you know. Why would you fight Roger Green? Like, what's wrong with you? Anyway, yeah, but you realize that it's not just, you're not seeing a band as a product, right? It's part, and it's not a culture you're just reading about in like Rolling Stone or some other book about the past. You know, you're not reading a book about the punk scene in '77 with the Sex Pistols and that world. This is here, and that seems somehow important in a way. And I was thinking, like, I've always, growing up, I wanted to figure the world out, you know, like a lot of people do. And so, like, my brain was putting pieces together, making connections and all that kind of thing. And I thought, well, that could apply to, like, Denver or any place. Like, there's great music scenes that no one knows about across the whole country. Like, I don't know, like, if I ever have the luxury and the time, I would write a book about, like, Iowa City's, like, experimental music scene, which people go, experimental music scene, Iowa City? Oh, yeah. Big time, one of the most important ones ever. But if you don't know that, you never really learn that. And like, I think Denver is still at the place where I was like, this is an anomaly. Like Nathaniel Rateliff never played in a band before the Night Sweats, right? No way. I never saw him at a small club. I never saw him playing in Badwater, California. No, that didn't happen, but it did, right? And there's all these connections between like there's a famous band that I know them from when they were nobody, called Future Islands, who like, you know, headline the Fillmore now. But I met them and they're kind of friends, like when they played at Rhinoceropolis, a DIY space, which hopefully survives the COVID era. But you go to these shows and it doesn't matter if they're famous, like who cares about fame? It's like, you're going to see something interesting, hopefully. And if you're open-minded enough about that, you can not only just see this and have your life enriched because of the art, but like because of a community you can become a part of. Even if you're not like hanging out with everyone. I don't hang out and indulge in substances with anybody. But I know some people from way back. Like I have friendships in the DIY scene going back to the 90s, and I still cherish them very much. Like I still occasionally talk to Cindy Wonderful from Rainbow Sugar and Josh Taylor, who ran Monkey Mania, which was a DIY space until about 2005 to 2008, whenever you want to draw that line when it existed. But I don't know, like I think one thing that's becoming more interesting is you see more books emerging about these micro scenes. And I think that's part of like the American story too. in the world culture and underground music, because these phenomena happen everywhere, and they're all important. Like last year, I read a book about the underground music scene of East Berlin.
Hmm.
Like, who even knew? And they had to do it kind of in secret. Or in like Russia, there was like a big punk world, but they had to basically do it under wraps. Or like, trying to think of that band from Slovenia, Laibach. That was basically illegal when they started. Like, you couldn't do that. They're like, no, that's like Western, like perverted rock and roll. Like, they weren't really a rock and roll band, but that probably made it even more weird. But like reading about these stories about like East Berlin and how they did it, it's pretty inspiring. And I think that just makes the world a better and more interesting place to know this stuff exists. And it's important for people who are there who could document it to do that and maybe share it. You know, like, I'm not saying what I do is that important, but excuse me. But there's more than just me. There's a few people. I did it pretty broadly and deeply and became a music journalist and documented it that way pretty extensively, if I may say so myself.
Yeah.
To the point where people joked about like my weekly column in Westward. They're like, how do you find all these bands? And I'm like, are they all real? And I'm like, I don't make up bands. That photograph of them, I took the photograph. I went to their show. I wasn't going because they were my buddies or necessarily. Sometimes they were, you know, but it was irrelevant. It had nothing to do with whether they're my friends or not. It just, do you exist and do you not completely suck? Like, I had a 51% rule, if I can call it that. Like, I had to at least like it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I didn't get it, I'm not going to write some mean thing about a band I don't know anything about. Like, who needs that? Who needs to read that later in life? Like, somebody just wants to be mean about your nobody band that you started as a kid or started as in your 40s because you were bored or whatever. I don't need to contribute to someone else's neurosis later on if I can help it, right? I don't want that to be done to me. And it's just cruel. But documenting the existence is good. Like, you don't have to say everything's super nice. Like, this band is genius. Like, no, but just talk about what it is. And I think that's something that we've lost in the last 4 to 5 years. Like, the media landscape, as you know, has been crumbling. And the priorities that they have, that you see expressed in media, is pretty diminished in a weird, perverted way. And like alternative media that world has basically collapsed. Like, you're seeing the last dregs of it now. Like, Westward is barely there. It looks like it's there, but you remember Westward in the 90s? Like, it was like this almost a tome, right?
It was a thick newspaper, yeah.
Right, yeah, and it was like a much larger newspaper, and then it shrank, and then it got more efficient in their own 2000s kind of neoliberal kind of way, and then now I see it shrinking even more. And I saw that happen to the Village Voice, which was like the underground paper or record for a while, pretty much in New York. And when I went to New York in 2009, it was basically gone, and then it became only online, and then the online thing went away too.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, I think it's gone. Yeah. And so those worlds were the ones that were most robustly documented: underground art and music and whatever, theater. To the extent they cover theater, that's barely covered at all. I plead guilty because I don't know about that much and I don't care about it as much, but I know it's important and someone should be writing about it on some level. Even, and I encourage anyone who's listening or has access to this, like, somebody should be doing that. And I know it's really hard, and to keep it up rigorously for years, it's not that rewarding. It doesn't pay very well unless you find a way. I never found a way. Like, people thought I made a lot of money at Westward. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, the editor at Westward doesn't make that much money, or like the music editor doesn't. And if you're not the music editor, you're like me. I remember, and this is going to sound like a lot of money to some people, I had the cover story. You get paid more for a cover story at Westward. And I wrote almost every article in the music section and wrote a bunch of other stuff. And I got paid $600. You can do that once. You can't do that every week. And we're like, $600 is a lot of money. It is not a lot of money. $600 in a week? Like, I don't know. That's way less than $15 an hour. I can tell you that. And you work your ass off for that $600, like crazy. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So there may not be that kind of reward in it. Hopefully that changes in the coming years, but I don't really see that happening right away. But it's something that should be done. But right now it's in a sad state. And like, if you're in a band, playing in a band, good luck. Most people don't want to hear what you're doing. Or if they do, I don't know. I don't even know what to tell people anymore. still have to make your own opportunities to play out and get people to come and see you or do something. You got to be more creative now. Like playing live, I don't recommend that right now to anybody. Like that's not going to come back for like a year or two, probably. I
Yeah.
know I'm not going to go to any shows for another year.
Yeah, so that's been an ongoing thing with some of the students in class, and
Yeah,
I've only mentioned briefly to students in videos and modules stuff like
yeah.
the Elephant Six Collective and like
Oh yeah,
Apples and Stereo and how they were doing this kind of collective thing for distribution and Elf Power. So it wasn't just Denver based because they're
right.
like Atlanta. Um, I think it's Atlanta for Elf Power. Um,
Maybe Athens, maybe
Athens.
Atlanta.
It is Athens. Sorry, it's an A.
No,
Yeah.
I can't remember.
um,
It could be either. It could be either one, really.
um, and thinking about like this has been an ongoing conversation this semester is just like what like we have a rather robust conversation nationally going on about inequity
Oh
and
yeah,
like some of that we've seen locally so we've watched some of the dazzle talks where people performers of color have been talking about the racism that they've faced sexism that
yeah,
they faced
yeah,
and how things might be different on the other end of COVID. But this is like very much like part of the moment where we're at right now. Like, well, what does it look like to make a collective right now, or what does it make like to do a micro scene? That was a term that you used. Uh,
yeah.
I don't know if you see any of that going on. I mean, I know that you're keeping up on the Queen City blog. You seem to be posting about every other couple weeks,
Yeah, I
sometimes.
used to be every day, but like I got burned out. I was taking third party submissions for writing up songs from wherever. Like on my Instagram, I shared an album yesterday from a band that submitted to me from Latvia. I'm like, there's music in Latvia, but a great, great indie pop band, like in the traditional vein, but like a Latvian version of that. And they're kind of a collective. They have a label that it came out on. I ordered it from Latvia. So there's ways to reach out to people. I think to your point about collectives, I think that model is still very, very good because if people have an idea what you're about or what your group is about, they have something to latch onto. It's not some amorphous, like, I don't even know what you're about. I think that's a problem with a lot of politicians too. Like, I voted for Joe Biden, I'll admit that. Not because I like him, I don't dislike him. I dislike 45 greatly. Um, but he didn't really stand for anything other than like a quote return to normalcy. But normalcy was not working for me. I don't know about anybody else. I think normalcy was not working for anybody that is not rich, and especially if you're a person of color or some other kind of a, like whatever gender identity isn't quote unquote the traditional thing and all that. It wasn't working for you either, and to a large extent, I would say. And but the thing that we saw in elections across the country is there were laws that were voted on. I'm circling back to my point there. That were about, like in Florida, they passed a $15 an hour minimum wage. That's like considered a highly progressive thing, even though it's a joke. Minimum wage should be like $25 an hour at this point. But that's a good start. And Florida voted on that. So that is about something. When like had Joe Biden run on some solid policy stuff and started being like, I'm not this rude, horrible, like game show host guy. He probably would have won by a wider margin. Like, I think if people have an idea what you're about, they're more willing to believe in you a little bit. Like some of my favorite record labels, like one of my favorite ones right now is Deus Records. They put out mostly dark wave and like industrial and goth stuff. But their stuff is really good. And even if a band I don't like that much, I will check it out, whatever they have coming out, literally anything they have coming out. Because I know that they may not codify it, but there's a certain thing I can come to expect from them. And I think like when you mentioned Elephant Six, there was a definite vision there, even if they didn't write it out and like, like here's our like manifesto. I don't think they had one, but all those bands were nothing really alike. Like Olivia Tremor Control is nothing like Apples and Stereo, but there was a similar ethos. Like, yeah, we're all influenced by like garage rock and the Beatles and like Daniel Johnston, maybe half Japanese or whatever, but also by noise, which is something that I think is lost in some of their interpretation of the music. So like you listen to one of my favorite albums of all time is Her Wallpaper Reverie by the Apples in Stereo, and it has all these weird noise interludes, like what kind of pop band would put this on the record? But that's what you could come to expect, like this level of creativity and I don't want to call it eccentricity, but like an idiosyncratic quality that can hook you. And I think I don't know, like Rhyme Sayers is a label out of Minneapolis, and they bring in people from all over the country, but they're like a hip hop label, and they've been going on since the '90s. And I have to say, like, I'm kind of inclined to like anything from Minneapolis because there's a lot of really good music coming out of there from all, the broad spectrum of music. But their hip hop scene is top notch. Like, like you know, I don't know why, but like it took me a long time to get into Atmosphere. But he's like a friend of a friend, you know.
Hmm.
Slug, one of his early albums was put out by Soul, who used to live here. Soul from Soul. I don't know what else to call him. SOLE from a bunch of different projects, but he was one of the founders of Anticon Collective. But Anticon, way back in the day, even now, like you have an idea where you're going to get from Anticon. It's going to be hip hop probably, but it's going to be a little different and a little more adventurous and bizarre. And I think you can do that on the local level too. Like here, I don't know if they're that active, but Hot Congress was a collective that put out indie rock. But those bands were all really good. You know, they weren't going to put out something that was like subpar. Like maybe it's not for everybody, but it's pretty good. Or like Group Hug Records is still a collective here, and it's indie rock, but a different kind. But I know that if they put something out, I'm probably going to like it. So I think that is a good instinct, and it's still a valid way of doing it. And you can pull your resources, like you don't all have to be rich or anything like that to put out a record, right? You can do that and put out and strategic. I can't talk today. Strategically put them out, you know, over the course of a year or whatever. And people are going to be into that if you offer them something that they can kind of latch onto. And I think that involves not just good music, you know, interesting music, but like a vision for what kind of things you want out in the world, but also like an aesthetic. So you want somebody who's like good on the art side of that. And also like some kind of marketing thing that you can do. I'm not good at that. I'm a terrible marketer. Otherwise I'd have a book contract by now, Roger. But like some colleagues of mine, like Jason Heller, you know, who's like a well-known writer now. And I'm older than him. Like, what is wrong with me? So like, I think if you can, like everyone comes to whatever they're doing with not like, you're not just a pure musician. You have other things going on in your life. You can bring that to what you're doing. And I think if you have a group of people that like get along, that helps, right? And pull their talents together, you can really do something with that. You're not necessarily going to sell a million records, but at least you'll do something that you can look back on or even enjoy now and go like, we're doing something cool or something good and worthwhile.
Hmm. Yeah,
I don't
so
know if that answers your question, but
one of the things and I want to make sure that the students have time to answer questions, so please feel free to interrupt students.
yeah.
But so right before COVID hit, I was supposed to play a show with Midwife, this really great band,
Yeah.
and really one of my favorites in town recently. But you know, it got canceled like everything else, and Midwife's whole tour got
Yeah.
canceled.
She's
Um,
supposed to play Roadburn Festival. That's a big deal.
yeah. Lots of people are pretty depressed about that. Esme Patterson, who I talked to this weekend, is depressed about it.
Yeah. She
Because
just put out her record and then COVID hit. Yeah.
yeah, like it dropped. Like the record came out in like March 1st, and she's
Right.
like, "What am I going to do? When am I ever going to tour for this record?" But anyway, the show that I was supposed to play with Midwife was actually at an underground venue, which did not advertise its address.
Oh yeah, I know the one you're talking about. And
And
yeah, no.
and and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on um, it feels like underground venues were already doing it before COVID. They were having these kind of like very curated and small
Hmm.
shows where they didn't want the broader community to know. And it could be because of like the ghost ship fire and stuff like that a few years ago. But I'm wondering, you know, like what your thoughts are on micro scenes and doing, maybe not right now with COVID because COVID's really bad this week, but
Yeah, it's
like,
worse than ever.
but
Yeah.
like in terms of future stuff, is there any resonance for you in terms of like intentionally creating smaller scenes?
I think that there are. I think with that, like you're not when you're doing like a DIY space, like, and I'm not trying to romanticize it because there's plenty of like negative stuff that's come out of them. Just like any venue, like people want to say it's. I mean, some people want to make it look like the DIY space is definitely where like predators in the world are coming from. Like, no, I've been to plenty of bars and seen shows there where they're like terrible people, blah blah blah. But what makes them different is like people aren't doing that necessarily for some commercial purpose. It can work that way. Like certainly like in the 90s and early 2000s, like there are plenty of bands that people have heard of that they only played like basements and warehouses. I made a whole life of that. Like K Records and like Kill Rock Stars, those labels, those bands would occasionally play a bar, but only if there wasn't another option because they weren't about that. And so I think there's still a room for that. And I think what makes that like I was mentioning about labels, like a venue can also like, I don't know, specialize is the word, but like at Rhinoceropolis, you could have a general idea. Like I would go there all the time in the early days of that. And I wouldn't necessarily know what the band was like, but I knew that it was going to be some underground weird thing or like quasi weird. And I was never disappointed, even if I didn't like it. Like see a band that was like a garage rock band, but it was a bunch of women in a garage rock band who didn't get the memo that garage rock has to be played this way. I was like, oh, thank God, they're not like following the rules. So like, thank you for not doing it. So you can have that kind of expectation and have that set up. So like I think it leaves more room for people to kind of be who they are and what they want to do instead of like having to fit in with like there was a trend going on, and you may or may not be aware of this. I'm sure you're aware of this because you're a keen observer of culture, Roger. But there's this trend in the last few years where, and I'm not trying to pick on anyone. I'm sure people have their reasons for doing this. Whatever business decisions or whatever you want to call it, catering toward this really safe, quote, indie rock format. And it made it more streamlined for programming on the radio per se. And I'm not trying to pick on 102.3, but I'm going to anyway.
Yeah.
Like there are good people that work there that I know are weirdos, or whatever. Like they're part of the underground world like me, but they have a job to do, and I don't blame them for that at all. And I don't blame the station for trying to stay alive, but it's like going back to the whole political thing. Like if you don't stand for something, people don't like it as much. I don't listen to that station very often. I have it on my whatever on the car thing in case I'm like, don't want to listen to NPR right now for God knows what reason. Anyway, yeah, but like, and you see this in festivals too. Like if it's streamlined to like this indie rock format, like indie rock is the only thing that exists or that people care about. When like if you took more chances, you would expand your whatever your base. I'm kidding. But you expand your audience some, or like people who might be interested in something like that instead of being alienated by, oh, this really safe thing. And there's no cultivation of your own taste. And I'd rather see something from somebody's cultivated taste that is, I know that's their taste. If I don't like it, I don't like it. But something that's coming from a human being instead of like something that feels like a business decision. Like no one really relates to that. It's like the whole thing about like, about the healthcare thing. Like nobody loves their healthcare company, but they like their doctor, right? Because of the personal aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that principle should apply to all this stuff too. But like for the quote business world aspect of it, that is kind of like discouraged completely. So I think like the DIY space or something like that reintroduces that as like, I feel so sick saying it's a model for like operation, but it really is. It's like a way of doing things that maybe you're not going to quote blow up, but is that the whole goal? Like the overarching thing, like maybe some things will, maybe some things won't, but is that the reason you're doing it? No. Like hopefully nobody's creating. I mean, maybe some people are creating music because I think I'm going to be a super big rock star, and that's fine. Have that dream. But if that's the only reason you're doing that, then it shows, and I just don't care about your music personally. I think it comes across, and I think people want to have that kind of authentic, wow, this is something special kind of experience. They don't want just something, I mean, yeah, gasoline. I don't care if I have an authentic experience with buying gasoline, right? But this is art. This isn't fucking gasoline or like fast food or something like that. I don't need that with certain things, but certain things I think you do.
Mm.
And I think, yeah, the DIY thing or whatever, like even a bar could do it. Like it does matter. Like it matters who's president. It matters who books a place. It matters who's doing sound. Personal thing matters. And I think intuitively we know this, but we've had that discouraged from our psyche by like late capitalism, if I may be a complete leftist and put it in those terms.
Are there students? Tom and I've been talking for a long time,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
but any questions or thoughts on this stuff from you guys?
How do you feel about like single artists, like artists that don't have a band, for instance?
Oh, I don't know. I think I don't. I like a lot of single artists. You know, like I write about a lot of them all the time. Um, I think there's no reason why the level of imagination I prefer doesn't exist there. Like one of my favorite artists right now in the whole world is this woman named, I'm gonna mispronounce her name, but Hanna Ojala from Finland. I never would have found out about her if I hadn't had it submitted to me. And she's like this. I don't even know what to call her music. She's like a poet, but she's like weird soundscapes, and she's not averse to pop elements in her music, but also she doesn't not tied to that. A lot of ambient stuff, weird industrial stuff, or like shakers and other things to make texture in her music. And as far as I know, she does it all herself, including her really good music videos. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of possibility there. That's why like I still take submissions from quote unquote singer songwriters, because sometimes that music coming from a very singular vision can be very powerful and really imaginative, because I don't know, it's coming from a person. I don't like it's from their imagination, and it's not necessarily going through some other process of having someone tell them it's okay. So I think I don't know. I'm pretty open to all of that, and like even a regular quote unquote straight ahead song can be really powerful if the lyrics are good and the music is well written and so forth, or interesting in a way that's unconventional. I don't know. I have a lot of faith in that. There's a lot of people who want to imitate something that's super commercially successful, and I don't find that as interesting. But sometimes even that works out for me. Like that's just me, my perspective on that.
I think I write pop and R&B music, and it's like a lot of my stuff is pretty commercial, like in the way that I shoot at it, like
Hmm.
trying to create it. And it's interesting that you were talking about like authenticity, and like you can tell if like if they're just like, I want to be famous and I want to be this like bubblegum pop artist, but like I think I worry about that for myself. Like I hope that my music comes off as real and true, and like it feels true to me, but then I do feel
Yeah,
like there's times where like instead of, because the music, I feel like the music you're describing is very self-serving, like to the artist, and I feel like sometimes I'll do things that are like for other people, like the people who listen to my stuff, which there's not much or anything, but like I feel like I'll do things like every so often that it's like it's not really for me and it's for them, and like I struggle with that, like hoping that that's okay, and that like still like staying true to yourself, but then also like attempting or making an attempt at this like commercial, commercial sound. But I don't know. It was interesting listening to you guys talk. I think that's why not a lot of people said much.
oh yeah, no. Like I know what you're saying. Like I don't see anything wrong with writing stuff that you're hoping connects with people, because like some of my favorite music is stuff that wasn't necessarily written the way I quote unquote prefer that or whatever. Um, like I don't think Johnny Cash necessarily was writing just for him all the time. Um, or a lot of really great pop artists who like don't even write their own music; they interpreted someone else's song, and it's connecting because the performance is also part of like the creative aspect of that, and I think that makes it easy to connect to as well. So I don't think there's like a right or wrong way of doing that. I just know for me, the thing that as you were saying, like serves the artist maybe. And there's definitely like a lot of self-indulgent, like, why are you doing this to us kind of art out there, to be honest with you. Like, especially in the noise world where I've operated pretty often. Um, so I think there's a balance to strike there, but I don't think that it's, I think it, writing with an audience in mind or like wanting to connect with people, I don't think that that is antithetical to what I consider like a good, valid, authentic art. I just think it's a different approach than maybe the way I would do it most of the time. Because like, yeah, I've written plenty of like super like forbidding, why am I doing this music? But I just don't share it with that many people because I'm like, who wants to hear this, in my opinion? And maybe somebody does and it connects with them. Like, so like, I don't know. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on that one. What you do. As long as your intent, in my opinion, is good. Like a friend of mine was joking about how he wasn't joking. He really does love John Mayer, who I don't. But John Mayer seems like a cool guy who means well. So like I would never make fun of his music because it's just not for me. But I can tell like he is somebody that takes his time to craft it in a way that maybe can appeal to people in a way that doesn't have to appeal to me, but in a way that should be meaningful broadly. And I don't find a problem with that. I like a lot of music that is like that. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like a broad thing. Like that's why I think I love art so much and music. It's because it's like it's all left up to interpretation and
Yeah.
feelings, and like there's no such thing. We had this big conversation when we first entered college. I remember in my music program, we all had this big discussion of whether or not there was a such thing as bad music. And I remember there were so many upset people. Like this, I remember this one girl turned to me and she was like, "Can I tell you something or I'm gonna explode?" And I was like,
Oh my God.
"What?" And she's like, "I think there's such thing as bad."
Oh no. I mean, maybe like, but I think that's definitely your own
And
opinion.
I
Like,
don't
it
know
doesn't.
how
Yeah.
you feel about this. Like I said, art is something that it's really interesting, like a thing that humans do, and like I just love it. Like I couldn't imagine my life without music and without being able to create music. And so I'm so happy that I like went to school for this. But like there's lots of weird crazy things out there, and there's something for everyone, I think. Like
Yeah. Absolutely.
even yeah, and I listen to there's an artist named Arca that I listen to.
Oh yeah. Arca.
um
Sure.
yeah, and that is some like scary, sometimes scary shit. Like I remember I would play it in the car with my friends and they would just look at me and be like, "What the fuck is this?" And I'm like, "It's a song I like." And they're like, "Can you turn it off? I feel like we're about to be possessed." And I'm like, "Okay." But
With
pretty
Arca?
much, but
Weird.
yeah, Arca, yeah, like there's like I think that's their name. Like I hope
Oh
that's
no. Yeah. It is.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Like.
them, right? Okay. I was like,
Yeah. Arca to me is a
um
pop project, but
oh
you know,
yeah. Okay,
yeah.
that's
For that
interesting. Yeah.
for that to be like scary to people, it strikes me as funny for some reason. Like I'd be like, hey, you want to hear something scary? I got plenty here for you.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I'm sure there's much more like intense
yeah,
stuff out there, but yeah, it's just I don't think there's any such thing as bad art. Like people, they can make songs that like hit your ear weird, or you're like, "Oh, that doesn't sound like something I'd hear on the radio." But if you really look at it at like a point of like artistic, like art, I don't, the word's not artisticness. But if you look at it like that, like it means something. Everything means something in some way. It's a thought that
yeah.
popped out of someone's head, and
No,
whether it
yeah.
was an empty thought or whatever, it's still important.
No, like it can mean a lot to like there's stuff I hate and don't like, and I'm pretty open about it. But I also don't think like what I hate means everyone else has to. Like I can try to think of something I hate. Like I hate crunkcore. But that means a lot to some people. There's some bands people I know love a lot, and I'm like, I can't be there with you. I can't listen to K-pop all the time. I have friends who love K-pop, all of it, like BTS and
I
whatever.
don't understand it. I don't not. It's not
Yeah,
even the language thing. I just don't understand it. Like on
no,
a
no,
like on
same here.
a musical level, I'm just like, I don't get it. It just feels so plasticky. I
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know.
but like some people love it, and I don't get it, but that's for them, and it means something to them for whatever reason. I just could never get into it,
Yeah,
and
they
that's
must be doing
okay.
something right, but I
Yeah, for
and I
somebody somewhere.
yeah. And I look back at like all the weirdness that was going on with like they have schools in Korea for this kind of thing, and like
Hmm.
you
Oh
know
yeah.
they're starved and then plastic surgery, and I'm just like I can't, like it looks so plasticky and like pretty and shiny, but like truly like on the inside like we know what it is. So I don't, that's probably another reason why I'm just like ugh, I can't with that.
No, yeah, I wouldn't even call it bad. It's just not for me at all. And there's lots of stuff that's not for me, and that's okay. I don't like. We don't have to pretend to like something that we don't like.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to be like that's bad. Like I might say it's bad music as a joke or like whatever, but I know in my heart that like it's just not for me. I don't care. I may think it, I may hate it, but just whatever. It's just music. It's not going to kill me. Like some people act like
true.
like something's going to harm you because it exists, and I'm like, no, not even really bad pop punk or emo from the early 2000s where the people in the band were kind of sexual predators. The music wasn't going to hurt you. Maybe the people would, but that's a different matter.
Yeah. Make your ears bleed, but you'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be okay. You just don't have to listen to it. I don't go out of my way to listen to stuff I don't like. I try to understand it, and if I understand plenty of stuff, but I just don't like. And it's okay. You can understand it and still not like it. Um, but to say it's all like, and you can even think it's all garbage, and that's fine too. But like objectively, I don't know if you can say that. That seems like a bold claim that really goes nowhere, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know. Like objectively bad music, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Like
no,
there's stuff,
I totally get you. I totally agree with you.
but yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. Tom, I want to go back to one thing that you were talking about earlier, and I don't know if you know this guy, this guy Richard Florida, who wrote this book called The Creative Class.
oh,
Um,
I've heard of that,
um,
but I don't know.
and it's kind of, I think, what you were talking about with 102.3,
Hmm.
and also just because this is going to be on YouTube, love you, Alicia Sweeney, and all of
Oh yeah,
the folks over
that's
there.
one of the people I was talking about. That is definitely part of the underground.
Of course,
And
yeah.
like Jesse, I don't think Jesse Witten's on that anymore, but she's definitely part of that world too.
Yeah. Um, but I wonder, again, I mean, this is something, a tension that I've seen, especially around discussions for DIY scene, or when I've gone to a couple of discussions in people's garage art spaces, is like, is there something damaging about, trying to, I don't know if I call it mainstream or the way you were talking about indie music with that, but I feel like there's this idea of the creative class that got applied to people who used to play in DIY scenes, and that a
Hmm.
lot of people coming up, at least with us, they now kind of have like establishment jobs,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Establishment, like if
right,
CPR is establishment, right, at this point.
right,
but
exactly.
but
Like,
but and I know people like, well, you're still involved with DIY stuff, and Chris Adolph from American Culture in Bad Weather, California, is very much involved with DIY scene stuff.
well, that's right. You were in his band too. Yeah,
Yeah, just for a second,
yeah, yeah.
um, but yeah, I'm wondering, is that part of? I mean, I guess, I mean, I could put it like in other terms, like, is it just that people like me have gotten old, or is there something and become kind of like establishment, and like I'm trying to look for where the room is for younger
Mm,
folks, like my students, for example,
yeah.
for how do these kind of pathways of networking and communication, how might they be working, um, in a way that doesn't dilute things, right? Like
Yeah, like
there should be some experience that we have as older people who did DIY stuff for a long time, that doesn't turn into a dilution of art.
it doesn't turn into some way to compromise it and all that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and so on and so on. I don't think that they're, I mean, it depends on who you're working with, of course. Like I remember John Wenzel, who you may know,
Yeah.
uh, like a great, journalist, right? Well, he had a band that was really good called Stung by Bees, I think it was called. I saw one show, and then he was forced to choose between playing in the band or being a writer for the Denver Post anymore. I think was, I don't want to mischaracterize that. And he, unfortunately for him, had to he had to go with his job. And if you're forced to make those decisions, I think maybe there's no room there, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times, quote unquote, establishment makes you make those choices. So, like, I think it helps if you want to keep doing what you're doing. If it's that important to you, you need to look into that with company. Ask if there's some kind of like, if you were doing this thing, would it be something that would come into question working for the company? Like, if I ran a company, I wouldn't care either way. Honestly, I'd be like, whatever, that's their off time. I don't own all their life, like I think in America we have this thing where people are their jobs and the jobs think that they own you in a weird way. And like in a rational civilization, that would not be the case, in my opinion. Like, anyway, but there is starting to be like in other cities, maybe more so when the media world is more robust, whereas in Denver, the music industry is not that robust, as I'm sure you're aware. Um, but there's organizations that you can become a part of and not necessarily compromise that unless they say there's some kind of conflict of interest. Like, trying to think, the music district in Fort Collins, I think, is a thing that's still an entity. I don't know if you can still be a musician and be part of that, but I think the people are.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, Youth on Record is an organization that I think still exists. Yeah, it still exists.
Mm-hmm.
I know people that have jobs there and they're totally in bands all the time that are like, they're involved in, I think, uh, hopefully future Denver mayor or Colorado governor, Kalen Heffernan, who ran,
She's been
yeah,
on. We had her wheelchair sports camp a couple weeks ago. Was
oh,
our
great, great.
yeah.
Yeah, she's a friend. And had I lived in Denver, I absolutely would have voted for her. People would have been like, oh, voted for her. Like, yeah, because I know she's a good person that knows her shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and has had to struggle and knows what it's like across a broad spectrum of things. But she's part of that and still is a musician, obviously. And like Tyler Brewer, who I think plays in that band, not in those Moco Chetes. Maybe that is it. No, no, no. Anyway, he's played in a bunch of bands, but he's also someone there. And I'm such a horrible person to follow up on things, but they were maybe talking to me about teaching some kind of class there,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't asking me to stop writing for Westward or like, whatever, doing what I do. So these things are out there. And even if you're not part of that, you can look to see what they do. And this is a harder path, but find your way of like fulfilling some kind of necessary role and finding a way to make money doing that. And one thing I would advise anyone in college, and I wish somebody had advised me when I was in college, like, there's all these internships that you can do that while you're still in college. Some of them even pay or like compensate you in some way, or make an opportunity to have an internship working in some capacity in some of these things and learn that way. And then you learn a skill set that is useful in that capacity where you can still keep doing what you're doing. Like, Chris Adolph used to joke about this, and everybody I know that went through the recording arts program,
Mm-hmm.
all these people thought they were going to get right out of college and, record a Kanye album and become a millionaire, right? That's not how that works out. That is not how the music industry works at all. And, other people were like, yeah, I'm taking a shift or two at Larimer Lounge. Those opportunities are there where you can approach people to do sound work or like some kind of production work or whatever.
Yeah.
I would get on that now in some way. In your own stuff, that's cool, but also work on other people's stuff if you can and develop your skill set, like to do some of these things. Like, I wish I had like kept up with like, I was going to go become a computer programmer and quit writing for a while, but I hated it so much. But had I kept up with it, I could do it. Could have been like, oh, well, I can make a little money doing JavaScript, but also learn how to make a better website for me or other people.
Mm-hmm.
So like in the future world, no one's going to have just like, even in our lifetime, Roger, like if you had the same job your whole life now,
No, no.
and I think,
In fact, we talk about this in the
yeah,
university all the time, that what we're training people for jobs that don't exist yet. So
right, that don't exist yet. Hopefully that's what you're training people for, that don't exist yet. Because if they exist now, they're probably going to be gone, you know,
yeah,
like a lot of things. Or like it's going to be so different, and having like an eclectic skill set and be really good at some things is helpful, regardless of what you're doing into the future, I think. And
yeah,
like HTML, like Westward was so terrible in some ways. They try to make it look like you're going to have to do more work, but you can control your things more. And I'm like, oh, get out of here. So I had to learn how to do HTML a little bit by putting my articles on the website. Whereas before they had someone they paid to do all of that, right?
mm,
Where you got paid this. So I got paid the same to do that plus write the article, right? And do the research and whatever. Wrangle interviews and all that kind of thing. That should be the job on its own. But learning to do the HTML thing made it easier for me to do my own website. Like them forcing me to do that because they didn't want to pay anyone else anymore to do it, or like take that out of the editor's hands. So like the more of these weird, non-glamorous things that you learn, I think the better. I mean, I'm going off topic a little bit there. I'm sorry.
yeah. No, but I think, I mean, I hadn't even thought about it, but like the intern thing is a really good idea, and I'd forgotten, like, geez, like the czars, when I was in the czars, like for a while we had an intern. And it was like, it was this, I think, a UCD recording arts student at the time who like had a final project or something, or maybe they were
Yeah,
in the business side of things, but like it just felt really weird being in a band. I mean, like, oh, we have an intern, like, but I think actually, now that I think about it from another angle, like if you can just reach out to people, like to bands, and like, I mean, when Nathaniel Rateliff was on our show, like in our class a few weeks ago, he
yeah,
talked about his, they have this like whole nonprofit sort of thing. So
right,
those might be ideas too, but you can also just reach out to artists that exist or might be at a little bit like of the level where you want to go to, and like reach out to them, and
oh yeah,
if anything else, you're making a connection.
exactly. Even if it's like a band that is nobody, you're helping them out. And you're learning things that are going to be helpful to you too,
Mm.
and you're learning it on the grassroots level where it matters all the time, not some theoretical thing you're reading about in an article in a classroom. Not
Mhm.
that there's articles about that. I didn't go through the music program, so I don't know what kinds of stuff people have to read for that. But it's not theoretical. You're learning right there, and I think that it's super important. And like a lot of times, you don't know. Like you got to think outside the box. I hate to use like a really worn out expression at this point, but like I never thought of these things because I didn't know that you could do that. And I'm telling people you can do it.
Yeah.
You can go up to like some club and say, I don't necessarily know if I can do sound there, but I want to know if I can sit in and watch and learn from the person who's doing it and like stay out of their way, but learn these things that happen all the time. Like things don't go 100% according to plan. You know that, Roger.
Yeah.
Even as a musician on stage, I don't know about you, but I've had my whole rig go out on me, and I had to troubleshoot it while the rest of the band played. That is so much fun when you have all these like patch cables, right? And one of them goes out. You've been
Yeah.
through that. You have to figure out what it is, or like take one of your effects out and then deal with it for the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Or if like my favorite is like, this never happened to me because I never used a tube amp, but have your amp blow out. That's always fun.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, can I? Or like, this happened to me on tour. My bass, the E string broke. And the E string, I don't know if you can break an E string, but somehow I did. Like, boom! Oh my god! Didn't have time to change it, but somebody in the band let me borrow it. But like that kind of stuff happens all the time, and like these weird little skill sets. Like I'm pretty good at changing strings myself if I try, or like troubleshooting stuff. Like I troubleshot alarm systems overnight for a few years for an alarm company, so I'm pretty good at troubleshooting electronics, like on the fly. I had to figure out how to like. You remember modems, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my modems, anytime the power went out, I don't know how this happened, but it would knock out part of the code in the string line for the modem. So I had to go in and like re-put it back in hex editing. I had to figure that out somehow on my own and fix it there every time the power went out. But these are little things you learn when you were like at a venue. Like, yeah, you may do sound there, you may pick up some shifts, you may like. Sandy Weitzel is one of the best sound guys in town. You know him, of course, Sandy Weitzel. And he got a job working for like Bonnie Iver, I think,
Yeah,
regularly.
he's Bonnie Iver's guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's their main sound guy. But he's a guy you'll occasionally see do sounded at the High Dive of all places, you know. Hopefully the High Dive survives. We'll see.
I think they got a grant. I think that
They got a grant? Okay, good. Because I know like Curtis Wallach moved to Trinidad or whatever to do something there. He's like one of the good guys. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I should probably wrap it up because it's hours. But and then just because he came up, John Mayer came up, and we've been having these conversations about with folks from the local scene here. But you also did Pat Pattison exercises from those books, and John Mayer was one of Pat Pattison's students. So I just wanted to give up to Pat Pattison, who's at Berkeley School of Music, and Jillian Welch is also another student of his and stuff. So
okay, Jillian Welch, who's she?
so yeah, I've just been trying to give people a broad spectrum of at Metro, which is Metro's a very singular type of place for talking about all this stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm a graduate of Metro myself, so
yes,
I know what it's like.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I guess we'll catch you all later. Please email me if you want to.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if you want to contact Esme Patterson, if you were looking for songwriting interaction or lessons, just send me an email.
Esme's great.
Yeah. Okay. Y'all have a good day.